This is section 9.3. This is part 2. We are supposed to solve this quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. The first thing we need to use the quadratic formula is a 0 on one side. So I need to move this 1 over here. So I'm going to subtract 1 from each side. And I get 5m squared plus m minus 1 is equal to 0. Now that I have it in the right order, I can find my a, b, and c. A is going to be 5. It's the number in front of your square. B is, remember that's a 1, so it's a positive 1 there. And our c is our constant, which is negative 1. Now we're going to plug into the formula. Our variable is m, so we have m equals negative b, so negative 1, plus or minus the square root of b squared, 1 squared, minus 4 times a is 5, times c, which is negative 1. And this is all over 2 times a, which is 5. All right, so let's start doing some calculations. I have negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 squared is 1, minus 4 times 5 times negative 1, that's 20, that's negative 20. So minus a negative 20 is the same thing as plus 20. And this is over a 10. Okay, so I have negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 21 divided by 10. This is an example of something that is impossible to solve using factoring. All right, so we would need to simplify this if we can. The square root of 21, well, the prime factorization of 21 is 3 times 7. There are no pairs there. So the square root of 21 does not simplify. I have a plus and a minus in here. I cannot combine these because they're not like terms. Also, I cannot divide this by 10. Your answers, you should split them up. Negative 1 minus the square root of 21 divided by 10, and negative 1 plus the square root of 21 divided by 10. These are as simple as they get. These are the exact answers. If you type this into a calculator and you use the decimal approximation, that's not what they're looking for, and you're going to end up getting it wrong. This is your answer. Okay, so let's look at this one. This one is easily solved using factoring. I'll come back and work it that way. But if I want to solve this using the quadratic formula, I need something squared times, here it is. Okay, I lost my formula sheet. All right, I need something squared, which I've got, plus something x, which I've got, plus c, which I don't have. So if something's missing, you remember when we did the long division, we just put it in with a 0. So I'm going to add 0 here, and this equals to 0. So this means my a is a 6, because it's the number in front of my square. My b is also 6, is the number in front of my x. And my c is going to be 0. Okay, so let's use the formula. X equals negative b, so negative 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, minus 4 times a times c. And this is over 2 times a, which is 6. Okay, well, 4 times 6 times 0, that's 0. So that just goes away. So what I have here is negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared is 36. And this will be over 12. The square root of 36 is 6. So I have negative 6 plus or minus 6 over 12. Now up here, we could not simplify this, and so we weren't allowed to combine these, and we had answers that look like this. Here, we can actually do this arithmetic. We're still going to split it up into a minus and a positive, but we're going to keep going because we can. So x equals negative 6 minus 6 over 12, or x equals negative 6 plus 6 over 12. Well, negative 6 minus 6 is negative 12 over 12. Negative 12 over 12 is negative 1, so that's one of my answers. Negative 6 plus 6 is 0. 0 divided by 12 is 0. So my two answers are negative 1 and 0. Now, I said earlier that this can be done using factoring, and it would be quicker. If we want to factor this, the first thing we would do is look for a GCF, and I can factor a 6x out of each of these. And that leaves me with x plus 1 equal to 0. You set each factor equal to 0. And then I would divide both sides by 6 here, and that gives me my 0 solution. Subtract 1 from each side. X equals negative 1, it gives me that solution. Now, the strength of the quadratic formula is that it always works. It even works on things that factor completely. Generally speaking, if you were just asked to solve a quadratic, if you see that it factors, that's going to be your quickest way. But if you don't, the quadratic formula is always going to work.